Welcome to The Reins of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you lead with presence and influence with trust. I'm your host, Merinda Smith, business leadership strategist, sharing actionable insights on mindset, EQ, and energy uniquely illuminated by wisdom gained alongside my equine partners. Today I'm talking with Heather McDaniel. It's a conversation about unraveling and becoming great. It's about removing the old models of leadership that are holding us back and working with the belief that real leadership begins within. It is a beautiful conversation. I got a lot out of it and I hope you do too. Let's begin. Hi Heather and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Now, Heather, you actually align so much with what I do and the message I bring with my equines about that inner leadership, that self-awareness and building of the trust. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation because I think it's going to really go into a lot of intricacies around leadership and trust. And one of the things that
Well, I think whenever you talk about trust, I do believe that trust starts with you. And it's not an easy skill to build. A lot of the times we don't trust ourselves
yeah,
to make decisions. We don't trust ourselves to take that next step and really trust that everything is going to work out. That's why we see a lot of personal things being shared with ChatGPT, for example, right? So because we're looking for that validation
mm,
and we're looking for, some kind of reassurance when the reality is, that can be okay sometimes. But the reality is that you have to go within and just really center yourself and understand the answers. You do have the answers. You might look to ChatGPT to just get that external reassurance and feel okay. Um, but really it just comes down to what's happening on the inside. And when you do have that trust, it's much easier to extend it out to others and to bring that to your team.
yes, oh, fantastic. I love that. Um, I recall when I first heard someone saying they were being coached and by ChatGPT, and this was like 2 years ago, so not long ago. And I went, what? I only use it to, expand my knowledge of or to rewrite what I'd written or what have you. And I remember thinking, how can we ask AI to coach us on what's happening within us? And it was really intriguing for me. And you're right, because then I tried it on myself. And I remember thinking over the next few weeks that I had tried it, it was that validation. Oh, okay, I've got this. That's so cool that I felt that I then had a buddy in the office that I could ask questions to and go, am I going on the right path? And yeah, so it was really interesting. And I like that reference you said.
Yeah, and I think the thing about, working with AI is that you have to remember that it's really just a language model.
Mm,
It's not, it doesn't have the emotional depth, it doesn't have the emotional nuance that's required to really guide you. And it's basically based on all of the data in the world that's kind of pushed into this, pushed into a machine, if you will.
mm,
I know I'm simplifying it, but it doesn't have the depth, it doesn't have the nuance that's required, and it doesn't have the gifts that we already have, the gift of intuition, the gift of knowing, the gift of trust.
mm.
Those are true gifts that we have, and we're outsourcing them
Yeah.
to things that were built on very old, outdated paradigms that are collapsing right now. So,
Yes.
and we can't even begin to have that conversation about the other costs, environmental costs and such. So I do say use it with caution and just understand why you're using it and
Yeah.
what you seek from it, and understand that the results you get really aren't the answers that you're really seeking.
No. And in fact, they then learn who you are and what you expect. And so it prints out this rhetoric of what you expect, and it's not
Yeah.
what you need, maybe. So you take, and I really love that. I've always believed that leadership is before you can lead, you need to be able to lead yourself and lead from within. And you take your work around the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I am based in Spain, and I do work a lot with remote teams based in the US. So yeah, so there's no real limit in terms of where I can work.
Hmm. Fantastic. So when you're working with a team, and you mentioned earlier that it's tech teams that you primarily work with, and I'm actually intrigued of, do you have like a, because in my head, to me, I'm thinking that they're like engineers and they're detailed. So I put them in a box. Do you, having worked so extensively with them, or do you see them, they're all diverse?
It's so diverse.
Yeah, right.
There are some engineers that totally fit the stereotype, but there are others that are incredibly creative, much more open. It's very much an individual thing.
Wow.
And you really have to take that into consideration. And it doesn't matter. I think for me, I tend to do this anyway, where it's just, really just taking the individual and seeing them and how they show up, working with them from where they're at
Yeah,
instead of
beautiful.
trying to fit them into the box.
So, when it comes to building trust on the individual, how do you start that process? Do you have any examples that you would like to share?
I think it's understanding the dynamics that currently exist. So what I do is I work with clients and understand the dynamics that are currently happening, and that are creating the challenges. And at times I'll just meet with the whole team and see where they're at, or sometimes I'll meet with people on an individual level as well. And based on that understanding, then I can develop the next steps to help them achieve the goals, and seeing, okay, like what's really getting in the way. Because sometimes it's not even trust, it's communication styles.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's making assumptions about other people, kind of seeing past that. So I think in the end, it's just I think I do a lot of customization and really take everything into account based on what's presented.
Yeah, beautiful. Do you have a core model, or are there core ingredients of trust that leaders often overlook that you always go back to?
I do. I think that initially it's built on assumptions that we make about each other, and it's also built on how people have historically showed up.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say that you and I have worked together for years, and I know that you always show up 15 minutes late. I know that. Can I trust you to be on time? Probably not, because I'm basing that on everything that you've done in the past. I'm not
Yeah.
giving you the opportunity to do something different,
Mm.
right? And so if I can forget every other time that you've shown up 15 minutes late, I can give you that space to do something different
Mm.
and to see you in a different light. And maybe you would show up on time. But, again, it's that choice of how are we viewing the situation and how do we view people. And so that's a starting point. And, again, it starts with the assumptions that we make about each other.
Mm. It's so true. And by the way, I'm not the one showing up late. I'd be the one showing up 15 minutes early.
Yeah, usually I'm in like the 5 minute early category.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it's so interesting, isn't it? Because we develop that cognitive bias of
Yeah.
someone without knowing it, and then we're always putting them in that box, and until we're made aware of where we are, and then we can go, oh, okay, so that's where I am, and this is how I can change. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm interested in your beginnings. Where does Heather come from to have built up this knowledge and foundation?
So I was born and raised in the US in New Jersey, and I've lived pretty much all over the US. Went to school in Boston for a couple of years, went to school in Florida, at Florida State University. My career probably started in a startup right after school. It was a online publishing company. So this was like years ago, during the dot-com boom. And I really developed an appreciation for the startup culture.
Go with it,
Yeah,
run. Mm,
yeah, yeah. But I've also have seen like the unhealthy aspects of it as well that really don't work now in today's world. And some of that gets glorified. Between that and where I am now, I spend a lot of my career in marketing
mm,
and in communications. And there, I really honed my abilities and skills in understanding what motivates people. What motivates people to vote a certain way, what motivates people to buy a certain product, what motivates people to take action.
mm,
And now I just apply it, taking all of what I've learned, working for different people, working in different environments, whether it was corporate, whether it was, small to mid-sized businesses, taking all of that experience and myself having worked with really good managers and really poor ones, really took that and created the Life Love Leadership Project because I think for me, I really want to use the skills that I have to help elevate people and to help elevate teams. So leaders can create that container where people can thrive
mm.
and really enjoy what they do. Because if you really think about it, nobody really likes Monday mornings, right? And so it's like, if you have a team that loves Monday mornings, you're in a really good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking about your marketing skills, and understanding those human dynamics is so important for, in sales and marketing, and yet they are transferable to where you are and how you're consulting. Do you have any
Yeah.
examples that you would like to share?
In terms of how it translates,
Yeah.
I think the best example is probably the work that I did in politics. I've spent time in political communications and working on campaigns. And during that time, I mean, especially being in the US, it was an interesting environment. And this was probably about 10, 15 years ago. And things were interesting then. Um, I think how it translates is learning more about team dynamics and
Mm,
how campaigns function. Because if you look at a campaign, you have your communications team, you have your field team, you have your campaign manager, you have your volunteers that are, when most campaigns are volunteer run. And so how do you get all of these teams to rally, not just behind the cause or just behind the message, but really show up for each other?
mm,
And that experience, like those experiences, and even bringing the candidate on board, right? And sometimes you have to bring a candidate on board, and get them aligned
mm,
with certain messages or certain ways of doing things. And sometimes that's not always easy. And I think in all of that experience, again, it's team dynamics, it's human dynamics. And that translates into pretty much every corporate business environment that I've been in.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think is at the core? What is there one or two or three areas that you think are core to getting that message across, getting people motivated?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that if the easiest thing that comes to mind is purpose, right? Because
Yeah.
we're all looking to contribute to something greater than ourselves.
Mm,
Um, and we want our contributions to be meaningful,
mm,
right? We want to attach a meaning to a positive meaning. Like, yes, this actually does make a difference. And it doesn't matter if you're opening mail or if you are doing data entry. And it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of the company. Like, the work has to have some kind of meaning attached to it beyond, okay, I'm here for the paycheck and I'm here just so I can get by.
yeah.
Um, I think that's important. I also think community.
Hmm.
Um, taking an analogy from sports, the teams that I've played on, the best teams that I've played on, I found that there is a difference between working with each other and working for each other. The best teams that I've been on, and this is true in corporate environments, this is true on playing fields. When you are working for each other, there's this sense of not necessarily you don't want to let people down,
Mm,
but you want to just go that extra mile because you care about the person next to you and they're doing it too. And everybody's bringing their best selves to the table. And those are like the best environments to be in where everything just flows. When you're playing with each other or you're just working with each other, it's kind of meh, all right, I'll do what I got to do. And, I'll clock out at 5 and call it a day. I just think that that kind of community aspect can help drive, elevate things to the point where they can play, or be or work for each other. And that's really the belonging piece.
yeah.
Because if you feel like that you belong, yeah, you really want to show up as your best self and you feel safe enough to bring your best self to the table,
Mm,
where mistakes aren't punished. They're just like, okay, we'll just clean it up.
yeah. I was listening to a podcast this morning and it was talking about your authentic self. And I recall probably 2 years ago, I used to really talk about being your authentic self. And for me, in my language, that was about, taking away the mask, removing that mask of who we thought we had to be. And I felt it was important at the time that I was speaking about it because I know I'd been there myself being a leader with who and putting on that mask every time I'd walk into the office, I would put on that mask and go, okay, this is who I have to be. So that was where I was coming from. And then about 2 years ago, I received this message saying, are you saying that you just throw everything out and you just be that rude, selfish self? And at the time I was like, oh gosh, have I got it wrong? And then I realized that that is being childish. That's not being an adult. So when I refer to an authentic self, I refer to it in an adult sense, being responsible. So yeah, you just made what you were saying, shared that with me. Do you have any thoughts around being authentic?
It's funny because you hear authentic self nowadays, and it's so overused,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like lost its meaning a little bit. And I think
Mm,
we have to come back to, okay, what does it really mean to be your authentic self, and what does it really mean to be present,
mm,
and to whether it's your full self, your authentic self, it's just what does it mean
yeah.
nowadays, and so like for me it's more presence
Mm,
and how you show up. And feeling safe. I think that's the important thing. Like, are you being authentic if you don't feel like you can ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you being authentic if you are afraid to state what you need because you fear the response or the
Mm.
reaction? And so I think that's really what we're talking about. At least that's, and for me, I'm gay. And so is it safe for me to talk about my partner or my spouse without, looking like I have, without feeling like people are going to look at me like I have three heads,
Yeah. And so you sort of have to
or
test the room, I could imagine.
and throughout my career, I kept it to myself. I would
Mm.
not, like, and this was like very early in my career when I was like, super insecure about it. And I was just like, okay, like, I'm just going to keep to myself. But the cost of that
Yeah.
is that I would just stay to myself. I would just come in and I would do my job, keep my head down, and, be a bit chatty and social, but I wouldn't be overly so. Like I
Mm.
would just be, I would still be very distant. And I think that, is that really being authentic? Because I felt like I had to hold back.
Mm.
And so I think it's really like, okay, what kind of environment are you creating if people don't feel safe to ask questions or to just be open about who they are?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that psychological safety, which in Australia
Absolutely.
we now have inbuilt into our WHS, our work health and safety framework. It's what we have to look, businesses have to look for. Yeah.
And so how now I have to ask, like, how does that work and has there been pushback from businesses to create that psychological safety? Because as we know in the US, there's been the massive pushback against, diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging.
Yeah.
And so, I'm really curious to know what kind of pushback there's been, if any, in Australia.
Uh, so I don't work in that space anymore. I know there was always uncertainty over what compliance means for employers and how they would demonstrate it. So it was really getting to grips with what exactly is required under the updated laws that counts as psychosocial hazard in the given workplace and what is reasonably practicable in mitigating those risks. So that's basically what I've heard. It's taken, it's spoken about, it's awareness now, like the awareness has come up. And in the
Yeah.
framework that I work under the training and assessing in the Australian vocational education, well-being is coming up. So in our legislative instrument, they talk about well-being of our students. So that comes up. And so what does that look like? The conversations that I'm hearing are, well, what does it look like? And
Yeah.
how do we support the students and the staff and everyone? So again, it's that awareness that we as business owners cannot just bury our head in the sand and have complaints happening about us and, people arguing on the shop floor. And you have to be aware of it. And you, as the leader, have to do something about it.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually interested in what you were saying about the pushback in the US about the inclusivity and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it basically what we've seen at a high level is the pushback coming from the government
Oh,
and from the
oh.
current administration really leading
Right.
that
Okay.
movement.
Yes.
And
Is that having ramifications down in the lower
oh,
levels?
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Because it just, for some reason, companies have capitulated. Not all, but yeah, there's definitely been some companies have stood up, other companies did not. I still think that what's happening is that they're trying to maintain it, but call it something different, or like there's another step to it. It's just, it's evolving, I think, in a lot of spaces.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, but that space is definitely being challenged.
Mm,
Um, and in some circles, I don't want to say all.
no, but what you're hearing, yeah.
Yeah.
And so so going back to trust and leadership and when you're working with companies, sometimes leaders want to have this trust, but they're clinging tightly to control. Do you
Yeah.
find that?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. And I think it's getting into, okay, what's going on here? What's the fear behind the clinging?
yeah.
Because usually when we're clinging on to control, we have a fear,
Mm,
right? And we have a fear that if we let go, things are going to fall apart.
yeah.
And we find, I mean, I speak from my own personal experience in other aspects of my life, right? Where it's
Mm,
just like, if I let go, everything's going to fall apart. So no,
yeah.
no, no, I'm going to hang on for all I can. And I think that you can start to build that muscle by just letting go of one little thing. What's one little thing that you can let go of?
Mm,
And, that might be delegating something. That might mean letting go of meetings or having to meet unnecessarily with your team. Or that might just be, you know what, I don't need to look over this person's shoulder today because I trust what they're doing and I trust that they're going to get their job done, even if they spend 10 minutes on Facebook. You know what I mean? So it's just really getting into the fear behind the trust and then just building the muscle one little thing at a time, where they can see, okay, things aren't going to fall apart and things aren't going to come to a head. Now, some people do control out of, not necessarily out of fear, it's more out of a power dynamic. That's a different story. If you're doing it out of a power dynamic, and that's a whole other discussion, to be honest with you,
yeah.
in terms of like, how do you deal with the more, I don't want to say authoritarian personalities, but there is an element of that where it's more about power
Mm.
rather than like, okay, I fear that everything's going to fall apart if I let go.
Would that sort of power authority figure come to you and ask for your support? Would they not be, in my head, I'm thinking they wouldn't be the ones asking for
Generally
support.
not.
Yeah.
Generally not. Generally, they wouldn't see the problem.
Yeah. Mm.
And that's, generally speaking. I, those instances have been few and far between in my experience.
Yeah. Mm. I would like to share a story. When you were talking, I was thinking about building trust and taking control. And I coach clients, and one of my clients said to me the other day, she's been listening to the podcast, and she's going, "It's like, I'm just been riding around with tight reins." And I was thinking of that when you shared that with me, and I went, "Oh my God, the penny dropped." So I started my horse King a couple of years ago. I started him to saddle myself. And very early on in our relationship, he bolted and dumped me on the ground. And he was very kind. He found a space that was very soft and full of leaves, but he dumped me on the ground. And then from then on, he would often try and buck and get rid of me and say, "No, I don't want you to do this." So I am getting older and I don't want to be on the ground. And so I've built up this fear. And even though I'm aware of it, I still haven't been able to allow myself to release it. Anyway, I have a riding coach and she was and so for me getting him to canter has been hard work and I'm sure it comes from my fear. And so we've had this on-off relationship, and it's been all at walk and trot and not going canter. And my coach the other day, she's going gallop, gallop. She's going because we got him cantering. She's going gallop, and I'm going
Yeah.
no, no. And so I really heard that fear in my voice, knowing that I was controlling him with fear. And at some point, I relaxed enough. And she said, let go of the reins, just one rein, just let it go. So, just like you were saying, just one little thing. And it took everything in my body and to overcome that fear to let my hand go forward. And it was a big, big step for me. Anyway, 2 weeks later, yesterday, last night, I was on him and I'm in my arena and I'm asking him to canter. And I realized that my hands were really tight.
Yeah.
And I let my hand go forward and he went and he just gave this big sigh and he just relaxed totally. And where he was up and nervous before, he instantly relaxed and trusted me. And I just went, oh my God, that was such a huge demonstration of that
Yeah.
trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing like how animals just pick up on that
Yeah.
and respond
Absolutely.
accordingly? Oh, I love
And
that.
and
Yeah.
And you know that he's been sharing with me that I have this fear and
Yeah.
I need to trust him. And when I do trust him, he's just amazing. And he
Yeah.
really is a beautiful horse, pony. When you're working with clients, do you get this pushback at any time where you feel that it could be a surface level and it's not that true trust that's good? Because sometimes that surface level is not enough to transform that
Yeah.
team. And so, do you often see that, or do you have to work with that?
I do have to work with that. And I think there's nothing wrong with the surface level as long as, like a lot of the times you have to start with the surface level stuff
Yeah.
and then you can go a little bit deeper. And I think that when you do go deeper and teams allow that, and they feel comfortable in that, and they feel safe enough, and this is where my job comes in, it's creating that space where they can go deeper and they feel safe to be a little bit more vulnerable and they feel safe to let their guard down. That's up to me
Mm,
and the environment that I provide, and the container that I create that allows that. But it's okay to start at the surface level. And I think then you can develop that willingness and evolve so teams can go deeper.
mm,
I don't see pushback that much, a little skepticism, in terms of, okay, why are we doing this?
yeah.
You know, that's normal. That's okay.
Mm,
I welcome that. And that's just a sign for me that I'm missing something in terms of how I'm working. Like maybe I need to, explain a little bit more as to why
mm,
behind it. Um, but generally speaking, I think it's all, that aspect is on me as a facilitator and the environment that I'm creating.
yeah, nice. And how long do you work with teams when you start working with them?
Usually I start off with a conversation about where the team is, what is the dynamic that's happening, and I may have those conversations with individuals. I may have that conversation with the team as a whole and get an understanding in terms of what the dynamics are.
Yeah,
And once I understand the dynamics, then I can basically develop the plan in terms of like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I think is going to bring the results that are needed.
you're looking for.
And
Yeah,
that, yeah, and that the client is looking for.
yeah,
And ultimately, the workshops and the facilitation that can happen online, or in person. So I've worked with teams in both environments. So for example, I've worked with a team where they were basically spread out. It was a leadership team that's remote, and they've had people from New Jersey all the way in California, so every and points in between.
And so could it take 3 months, 6 months when you're working with them, or is it longer or shorter?
It can be shorter, it can be longer. It depends on the team
Yeah, okay.
and where the team is at. Like I've worked with a team and for a 2 hour workshop and have already seen progress,
Yeah.
and so, but they were also ready for it. And they also were aware of the dynamics that were happening. So that was a lot easier.
Mm.
And then there are certain environments where it just takes, 3 months, 6 months, sometimes a year.
So, what is your vision for how organizations could look if they trusted one another?
Well, this is really interesting because I think where we are right now in you look around and there's a lot of chaos right now. And I think that what's happening is that the old ways of doing things, the old paradigms are falling away.
Mm.
And we have this wonderful opportunity in front of us to create something new and to do things in a new way. And I think the bottom line is what I was talking about earlier. It's how do you create an environment where everybody can thrive
Mm.
and everybody feels great about what they're doing and they feel like that they're contributing and they feel like that their work is meaningful and they feel like that they day in and day out they're making a difference. And I think trust is at the heart of that.
Yeah. And it's almost like during COVID, we were working prior to it, we were working in a particular way, and then we were thrown into so much chaos, yet we learnt from that we could work in a different way. And now we're coming out the other side and we're going, okay, we now know that we can work in a different way and we have this opportunity to grow in even better ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you at the same time you also see some companies clinging on to the past, right? When they're forcing go back into the office days
Yeah.
and employees are pushing back. Like, wait a second, that's not working.
Mm.
That's not gonna, that flexibility is not helpful
Yeah.
because I can't contribute to my kids' lives as much as I would like, or I can't contribute to my community as much as I'd like because I'm, from 8 a.m. until, 6 p.m. I'm in the office.
Yeah.
So it's, that can be a little challenging, I think. And I think that employees are really starting to recognize what they truly value. And I think that's leading the shift.
Mm. Yeah, so it's not all one way. And if it was all one way, then maybe it could be another Kodak moment where, they stayed so rooted in the past and the successes of the past that they weren't prepared to change. And then look what happened. Life went on
Yeah.
around them
Yeah.
and others took over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are lots of industries that where you can look at, like that failure to adapt.
Mm.
Great example. Long, long time ago, I worked for the Yellow Pages. You remember
Okay.
the big
Yeah.
books?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what happened to those, right?
Mm. Exactly. We just Google it now.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And when I was doing that work, um, at the time, Yellow Pages were a profit center
Mm.
for phone companies,
Yeah.
right? Because it was all advertising based. And that revenue kind of supported everything else in the organization. And so they were going to hold on and try to, sell that Yellow Pages, but as a, like if you're selling it, what was really interesting is that you go into businesses where, like, let's say, like a, family or run business, you could, at that time, you can tell where everything was going because the kids were like, they were like, no, we need to be online. You
Mm.
know, everything is going to get Googled. And the parents would be like, no, we're sticking to we're still going to advertise in the Yellow
You could
Pages.
see that.
Oh,
happening.
absolutely.
Mm,
It was very,
mm,
very clear at that time.
yeah. And it was thousands of dollars. Well, at least in Australia, it was thousands of
Yeah,
dollars to put an ad in the yellow pages.
absolutely.
And even more
Absolutely.
if it was color.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, it was definitely a very, I mean, there was definitely ROI in it for businesses because at the time that was the only game in town,
yeah.
right? So like you need a plumber at, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
you need to find, you had to open up that book and be like, all right,
Flick
who's
through
got the
it.
24-hour service?
Exactly, exactly. And then dial on the phone with the old dial
Yeah,
up. And there's another, oh gosh, changes. If we look at technology in any shape and form, there are so many changes. And so it's leading the way for how we as humans could change the way we think and work
yeah.
together and connect. Do you have any fun team building activities or sharing stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think, with team building activities, it's funny because I'm not like the rah, type of person. I like to be intentional with the team building activities that I do. And I also like to bring fun to it. And it's interesting because I've sat through so many of those workshops that I tend to be like, seriously, like I tend to be rather cynical.
Yeah.
And so write and create my exercises based on where I was in the back of that room.
Yeah.
Super cynical. So I tend to create for that person. So I try to make them fun and also intentional.
Yeah.
So, for example, like one thing that I've done is I've worked with one team and this was just like a let's just play type of exercise. And the exercise was, okay, you have like 10 minutes to create a completely useless product.
Hmm.
And it really just helped people just kind of like turn on like that creative
Loosen up.
streak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to loosen up and just be playful. And it's fun,
Mm.
and so it's like, okay, like how useless can it be? And that's the thing, it's like it just needs to be useless. If it's useless, that's perfect,
Yeah.
right? And there's nothing attached to it. And the teams that I've worked with really enjoyed that. Honestly, I've been impressed in terms of like how quickly they were able to put something like that together.
Mm.
And just like the playfulness that came out of that.
Have you ever worked with Lego in your workshops?
I
If
have
you,
not. No, actually, I'm aware of it. I'm
yeah.
definitely aware of it. I have not worked with Legos
Mm.
in my workshops. I'm aware that there's a whole like certification
There
and
is.
play, and that's actually something that I've explored.
Mm.
And it's on definitely on my radar. And at this time, I don't. It doesn't mean that I won't.
Yeah.
So
And I also am curious about it. So yes, it could be a great way of getting people thinking and loosening up, like you're saying, getting them, let's make something useless. And yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and sometimes all it is just, like paper and pen, and that's all you need. The other thing that I like to bring to the table with in-person workshops is photography.
Okay.
Um, and that's something, photography has been a long time passion of mine, but what I love about photography is that it forces you to be present
Mm.
and it forces you to see the details because the camera picks up everything.
Yeah. And now with
And so,
current
and
phones,
now
we
with
can all
phones,
be
yeah,
photographers.
absolutely. And it's just like a way to just change perceptions a little bit. And one of the things that I like to do, and again, this is in person, is take a cue from Ansel Adams, the black and white photographer. He did a lot of the Yellowstone National Parks, the big, beautiful landscape photography, black and white work in the 40s and 50s. And he had this saying, he talked about just taking 2 steps will totally change your perspective and it totally changes the picture. So, you could stand in a spot and think that you have a great picture, but if you take 2 steps to the right, 2 steps to the left, you will have a completely different photo, a completely different image that can be 100 times better. And just
Wow.
that tiny shift in perspective, and he was right, it can change your perspective.
And I love that analogy because I can see it flowing through in the way that you are, your presence, your awareness, and how you see a situation. And it's a bit like that exercise when we sit in the different chairs. So, just for the audience, it's you in your space. This is how you think of it. And there are other people. So, you go and sit in the chair of the other, and you then experience that situation from the other's perspective.
Mhm.
And then the third chair is the outsider's perspective, or it could be, whatever you want to make it. But so, you could be a third party hearing this situation. And so you're sitting in that chair, and that's what you are. You're that third party. So then by the time you come back to, and if you experience those two other spaces, by the time you come back to your space, you then have this way bigger picture of how the situation that you perceive to be a specific way is being seen in so many different perspectives, a bit like your photography.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
So, wrapping up, is there anything you would like to share with the audience about the work that you're doing?
I think I'm always happy to have a conversation with teams that are struggling with burnout. It's not so much, like you don't know if, how do you know if your team isn't trusting each other? Some of the challenges that teams, the symptoms, if you will, collaboration issues, communication issues, burnout. And I see that a lot in tech. If you are inclined to have a conversation, by all means, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at heather@heathermcdaniel.com, and we can certainly have a conversation and see what the best path forward is for your organization.
Yeah, fantastic. And very remiss of me to not ask, what are the common things that you see when trust is not in the team? And you've just explained those, and it's the burnout. And do you want to go through them again?
Sure, it's typically burnout.
Yeah,
And I see that a lot in tech teams.
yeah,
And I also see communication issues,
yeah.
collaboration issues, and a lot of the times, and I do address this, is sort of like a lack of vision and strategy, or you're not seeing the full strategic picture. And I actually do work specifically to address the strategy issue as well.
Beautiful. It's been wonderful talking to you, Heather, and I really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming online and having this chat that was just off the cuff of how it flowed. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me on the Reins of Leadership. Remember to lead with presence and influence with trust. Subscribe for more insights and find resources at merindasmith.podia.com.